Yeah.
Hello and welcome to this edition that we're going to talk about ways that you can overcome and move on after being involved in a high demand or toxic religion and the guest I have with me, we were both raised in the LDS church. And so we're going to talk about ways to overcome some of the trauma that we experience as we're going through. And so the reason I'm doing this podcast is if you're transitioning out, you could get stuck in a rut, and we get in these negative vortexes, and it's associated with people with the same wound, and we keep re-wounding ourselves, and until we can start learning new skills to step up and upgrade our life, we kind of use our old dysfunctional or outdated skills that we learned in the religion, and then we swirl around and it's functioning for way too long. And Ashley has kind of been on the same timeline as me, and we were together a couple of years ago, and we were the trauma of transitioning. And so I know she's passionate like I am in helping people to recover their life and reclaim their life. And I'm really passionate about this because it's not enough for us to wake up. We have to grow up and clean up so we can show up and step into the greatest version of ourselves. And that is what I'm passionate about. And so that is what this interview is on. So this is actually my first one, and I have to show you that I went and voted today. This is going to be like a timestamp because we're in this election right now. Is like one of the craziest elections there's ever been. And so I went and voted today. But I also have just been doing all kinds of things today that are helping me get excited about this new direction that we're going. And I'm grateful that Ashley has offered to come up with she has to say. She's a very dynamic person. And so Ashley, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? Like, where do you live, your family dynamics, and maybe just like the short version, because when you're done being sick in the church and being sick coming out of the church, it's funny how our story shortens, and you can tell it in 5 minutes, where I always know I'm with someone who's just barely leaving or is still in trauma. Their story takes a half an hour. They can't seem to get it out. And now we're just like, I was raised Mormon, got out, and this is where I am now. Because you just feel better. But I would like to know enough about your story to help us understand kind of where you were coming from and your experience.
Yes. So I'm Ashley Moody, and I am a 45-year-old woman that is marketing professional and also soon to be Kundalini yoga instructor. Woo! So I'm excited about that. But I'm married for 12 years now to my current husband, who was also born and raised in the church. And we have 4 beautiful children together, and my 2 amazing stepsons are also part of our journey. We actually just moved to Palm Desert. We were living in Lehi, Utah for all those 12 years. So we are very happy to be back to California, and have been enjoying every minute.
That was probably some of your recovery, would you say?
Oh, absolutely. And we can get into that for sure. But as far as like my shortened version, I won't get into all the reasons why, because we all have our own reasons of why we get to where we get to, and understanding why we don't want to be a part of the control group. But I'll start. So I actually left the church when I was 18. And then I went into the wondrous world. I kind of just left it behind me. I didn't do any research, nothing. And I ended up getting married and then getting a divorce. And I was so just devastated that I got a divorce, that I'm like, oh, I just want my family to just wrap their arms around me. And so I came running back to my family's belief system, because I thought I didn't realize it at the time, but I thought that that's what would get me approval and love, the love that I was searching for. And especially in, trauma times in our lives, we want the people around us to just put their arms around us and say, everything's going to be okay. And
and you kind of want that structure after you've had a traumatic experience. You kind of return back to the structure that you had when you were younger and when it felt stable and safe.
Yeah, well, it was a sense of belonging. I wanted a belonging. I
Yeah.
didn't have a sense of belonging. And so that's a key, common, need that we all have. So fast forward, I got married, had all my kids, and was doing the Mormon thing, and completely like stalwart. I did everything perfect. I had to, because I had to prove myself that I could do it, and that I was going to just, get the most approval from my father that I always was searching for. And then things just started to kind of happen, and I started to realize things were adding up, and watching documentaries and different things. And finally I got the courage, probably around 40 is when I actually got the courage to tell my family, I don't think this is for me anymore. And it's weird, because you think there and go, well, why did you need to tell your family? And I think in this religion, you kind of have to, because if you don't, you've got the underwear, right? The people,
The
if you want to
underwear
wear a tank
alone
top,
is awkward.
it is. So I'm like, I want to start wearing tank tops, and and just being myself and who I am and what I believe. And so at 40, I was really nervous at 40 years old, mind you, to tell my family that I was leaving their belief system. And so I decided to send an email, and I'd gone back and forth for months and months. And I just want to tell my dad face to face. And because, he's super patriarchal, the typical, very dedicated in the church. But then I was like, oh, but if I tell him, then I feel like everybody else is going to feel left out, like my stepmom. And I didn't want to leave her out, but I didn't want to do it with them both, because then I would feel ganged up on. And so I ended up deciding to send a letter. And then I thought, oh, okay, I can have my thoughts all together. So I did. Well, I didn't quite understand about cognitive dissonance at that point. And so my father did not respond well. And from there on, it just became really toxic and really hurtful. He was hurt. I went back actually and read through the emails. I haven't done that in a long time. And I read through to make sure that I could remember correctly on how everything went down. And, he was hurt, and he was angry. And at the time, when you're going through your own hurt and your own grieving process, you don't realize other people are going through their own grieving process. And because you're feeling such, shunning already, from it, that you're like, how can that be worse, what you're going through,
So let me stop you there, because this is an important piece. In many LDS families, I know it's not just an LDS thing, but we're taught to be responsible for our parents' feelings. We've never established any boundaries, so there's all this enmeshment. And so, yes, I love what you're saying, because you're dealing with your own trauma. You're looking for support from what's, that's been your safety net for your whole life. And instead of getting that support, you're getting rejection. And then you're feeling responsible for their emotional state, and you're trying to manage it all like it's your responsibility.
And that's interesting that you bring that up right now, because this is part of the story where he actually made a statement. It was so confusing to me at the time, and it still doesn't make sense to this day. But he said, we don't trust you anymore, because, not because you left the church, but because you didn't come to us before you made the decision.
And you're 40 years old.
And I'm 40 years old. I'm married. I have a boatload of children. I'm a professional, and it's so, the conditioning that they have gone through too, of what you're supposed to come to us. And I'm like,
get permission.
And after that, I later responded to that email and said, Dad, this is not between you and me. This is between me and God, higher power, whatever universe, whatever you want to call it. I don't understand that. And he couldn't, he's doing his own mental gymnastics of his own, conditioning as well. And so it was all very hurtful. And it came down to that for about 6 months, texts and emails, he would not talk to me face to face. He wouldn't talk to me face to face. It was so bizarre. I tried, But he wouldn't. And he ended up he kept the door open so that he could have a relationship with my children. So he would invite my children, these are young children, by the way, to family events, but not me.
Huh.
Yeah. And so I actually went along with it for a little while. And then I realized how hurtful it was. And there was a lot of things that went on, but I ended up, saying, no, I can't do this. I mean, he ultimately made that choice and not wanting me to be around. There was no door open. Like he had made his statements, And so I knew that. And I'm like, well, if you can't have a relationship with me or even try, then you can't have a relationship with my children. And he did not like that. And he took it in a way of like, you're trying to keep them from me. And I'm like, well, no, I'm not going to go and just drop off my children at your house. And then like, that's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
So that was, so my father was probably my biggest impact of the story for me, of the pain and the loss. I had him up on a pedestal. My father was this wise man that I just admired so much. And then he started to I realized emotionally I was surpassing in a way. Like it was weird to be an adult and go, my dad's not emotionally like dealing with things well. Like it was a really weird kind of role feeling reversal that I was not anticipating whatsoever. And he basically turned his entire side of his family away from me. And, I also distanced myself a little bit too, because when you have any kind of rejection from people, that doesn't feel good to be around. And
it's your responsibility to keep your environment a place where you can grow, a place where you can continue moving forward. And if you have, this relationship that's just holding you down and it keeps re-wounding over and over again, it's your prerogative to say, I have to cut this off for both of us.
I did. And I was very difficult to do, but I knew that I needed to heal. Yeah. I knew I did. And so I had friends and family all distant, because I was vocal on social media, and which is totally our right to talk about our experiences, but it's very hard for current LDS members to hear some of the things that we've learned about, and they don't want to hear it, and they want to stay in their kind of bubble. And I did the same thing when I was involved.
Oh, I did too.
Yeah. And so anyway, so I unfriended a lot of people because it was there was some again toxicity, that just non-acceptance, and I'm like, nope, I'm not gonna do that. So I would say probably about 10%. I have about 10% of people that are still involved in the LDS church that I still have relationships with, and it's distant. It's nothing like
best buddies.
Yeah, no, it's not like that anymore. But what I learned is that it opens up for more amazing people to come in and love you. Yes. And meeting people like you, and I have so many friends and people that I just adore and that love me for who I am as well. And that's a great feeling. And you want to go where the love is. So
exactly. That's a great tip just right there, is go where the love is. Lean in towards people who get it, who understand it, and who are going to love you no matter what.
Yes, absolutely. So so there's been a lot of loss, but and it's been messy, and you wanted to talk about a little bit about some of the things that I've done to help myself kind of get through.
Yeah, that's our main focus.
This is my story, of what happened after I left. So
yeah, that's a lot of trauma.
It is a lot of trauma, and there's a lot of things that I've done and had to reprogram myself, and I still do. I mean, I'm not an expert in this whatsoever, and I'm still learning, and I'm still peeling onions and layers, and I think we probably all will be for a while.
Well, would you agree that this transition out of religion, because it requires you to like unpack every aspect of your life, because the religion is woven into every aspect of your life, every choice you've ever made, is always on the backdrop of the religion is always there. So when that collapses, it's like your whole world, I call it like a Twin Towers moment where it just crashes and collapses, and there's rubble that you've got to climb out of. And it's epic, and it's an opportunity for you to start doing that inner work. It's a grand invitation. You've got to restructure everything, and you're learning now to be the one in control of that, to be the sovereign authority of how you're going to reconstruct. And so
that is powerful. That is so powerful. If you can do that and get yourself, to the points of healing versus reliving trauma, I think that is so key. And I think that's what we want to talk about today, to be able to help those that maybe are spiraling in that like trauma, circle that you can very much get stuck in. And I was for a while. I think we all have.
I was too.
It's part of the process, So there's no shame in that.
No. And this is what we want. The reason we're even doing this is because we know it is hard and it is difficult, and we want to be able to support those people who are going through it. But I'm anxious to hear what you have, 5 specific things that you did to help you kind of restructure your life and get back on your feet.
Well, these are in no particular order. I just, have been thinking about them this week when you asked me to come talk with you. And, but I would say probably the first thing I did, and I think it's a requirement because we can't do this alone. We're human beings. We're tribal. We want community. We just lost our community. What do we do? So I think the first thing is you've got to find support. And, first off, people that you feel safe with, that are already you're close with, and you're going to find that people, they drop off like flies. I mean, or some people will be like, no, I totally support you. And then it's just silence and then nothing, and you're like,
what do you say? They don't know how to relate to you anymore, and you don't relate to them. And so it's not that they're angry or upset. It's just almost like the chasm between your commonalities
is talk about anymore. Yes.
Yeah, we don't have anything in common now, and I'm living this whole different life, and half the stuff I have to censor from you because I don't want to hurt your feelings. And because the church is so much of their life, it's hard for them to not talk about it.
It's true. I remember being really triggered for a while when people would talk about missions and things like that, and I'm like, I don't want to hear any of it. I'm done. I've had enough,
Yeah.
But it just depends. You have to. There's a balance, But support. So at first, a lot of times for me, I had 10%. So I was like my mom. My mom she left the church actually 5 years prior to me. So I was so lucky to have a parent that could be there for me. And then my husband actually took about a year later than me. And so we had I think I was talking to you when we first met, and he was still not out, and it was hard. And we were not on the same page, but we did decide. And for those of you that are struggling in marriages right now, because it takes a toll, we did make an agreement that we would not let the church separate us, anything with it. And so we stuck with that. And I'm really grateful for that, because it has been messy, and we've had to do a lot of reconditioning as well. So, but beyond your close people, I would say, online support groups are helpful to a certain extent. We were talking about that a little bit. Sometimes it can be a little overload and put too much of us, of negativity, constant, that cycling, that validation that you're seeking 24/7. Oh yeah, you felt the same.
They did this to us too. And they're and that's not fair. I didn't even think about that mean thing that they did, but that's not right. And so we keep rewounding ourselves.
It's really part of it, and you need to go through that as you're learning new information. I think it's really important as part of the process. But then it's trying to figure out where's the line.
Yes. And
when you're ready to heal, when you're ready to let's go more to light, than the shadow work.
I need to leave it behind me.
So, and then I would say, Wendi, especially since you were an integral part for me in my transition as well, is find somebody that has been involved in the church, that has, expertise, coaching, experience that can really help guide you through, because you don't know what to do. There's no playbook for this, or a therapist. And I did several. And so I have been in therapy. I mean, it's a process in figuring out. So that's find your little support team. You got to get your little support team, and so that you can just kind of start scratch. You're starting from scratch.
Yeah.
Really.
Well, and for me, it just seems like how you have a big, massive earthquake and you'll assess the damage, not realizing that you're going to have these rumblings going on for aftershocks for quite a while, because you don't realize it really is uprooting everything that you've ever believed in, every way that you act, the systems that you use to cope in life, everything collapses. And so we don't realize how complex it really is to leave the religion. It's not, really it's epic.
And that kind of brings me into kind of the next strategy, is allowing yourself to grieve and others, and try, like, it's so hard to not, like, to get outside of yourself in these moments, because aren't we told all the time, like, you got to take care of everybody else, and you don't take care of you don't take care of yourself. You don't have any boundaries. You just do for everybody else, and service and service and service. And so you're finally allowed to actually take care of yourself. And so it's hard, I think, during that grieving period for you're like, I'm going to protect myself right now, and go through all the process, all the grieving that's needed. But just, I guess having an understanding that people that are in the church are grieving you leaving as well. And that helps, I think, in finding the understanding of why they're behaving the way they're behaving towards you. And it's kind of not personal.
Well, and that's the one thing that I teach in my coaching, is that that grief is a necessary process, but that grief is not because you left. The grief in them is because the doctrine teaches them that
that's right,
you are lost and that you're going to be separated, and the doctrine is so harsh and so toxic. It's the doctrine that causes the grief, because the fact is, I'm still right here. I'm right in front of you, Dad. I'm here, and we're connected, and I still love you. But because the church is everything is the church, it's this almost like a faux grief, like we're really grieving, but we're only grieving a doctrine.
Absolutely. And because that's the conditioning. And one other point too is external validation. So we're in this process of letting go of external validation, because we're taught so much, like bishop interviews, your parents' approval, neighborhood approval. I mean, your calling, are you doing your calling well enough, and are you doing everything? Like
even your personal progress, and you have to do medallions, and you got to get to
yes. And so that's why it's really easy to stay, I think, in that circle of the grieving, because of that external validation. We're seeking external validation from our online groups, from people that we know. And so that feels really good to get that external validation all the time. But the real work right here.
Yeah.
Internal validation.
You know the secret.
That's where we have to finally get to that point to let go of that external validation. Otherwise, we're just going to stay in that cycle. And I have seen, and I know you have too, Wendi, so many people stay in that cycle because they can't get out of that.
Years and years.
Yeah.
Yeah, they had all the backdrop, or the church really fed that need for the validation. And then when you leave it, it's almost like you just instead of going within and changing the source, you're just transferring it onto the ex-LDS group.
And even God is an external validation in the LDS church. And it's within, so everybody's different. And when they leave, and where they, if they believe in God, if they don't believe in God. There's several names: source, universe,
Yeah.
all these, whatever fits for you right now. And it's okay to change your mind over and over and over again as you're going through this process. I know I did. I had to go through that process to evolve to where I am today, and it's just normal. So I think we're also taught not to change our minds in the LDS church. Like, this is what it is. No ifs, ands, or buts. This is the path. And a lot of people like that, and that's great. For those of us that have left, we don't like that path anymore. And
well, we realize our belief system was so closed and so rigid and black and white, and this is this and this is that. And then when you leave, you realize I can believe whatever I want. I get to choose what I'm going to believe. And those beliefs become fluid, like you were saying, that you have permission to say, well, I used to believe this, but now I've got more information. And I'm going to challenge that belief, and I'm going to upgrade to a different belief. And just giving yourself permission just to that alone it's a big deal.
It really is. So that's one thing I noticed, is that God is used almost as an external validation, and same thing with the devil too, of why you do what you do, instead of creating your own accountability for your own actions,
Yes.
So it's just all part of it, all part of the process. So I would say the next thing, once you can kind of let go of that external validation and the grieving, when you're starting to heal, because I still grieve to this day. Like, it's not just a cut and dry, this is, you go with this step, this step, this step. It is like, yeah. But I would say enough where you get to a point where you're like, I'm ready to move forward and do life like again, and heal. And so that's where I think the reprogramming comes in, and also setting personal boundaries and learning about that, because we are not taught that we can have personal boundaries, and so we're having to like completely change the way that we think and do and behave. And what is it that I like? I don't even know what I like anymore. Or
what do I want without being told what I'm supposed to want?
Yes. So I think it's really important to talk about personal boundaries here, because this is where you're going to have to start, again, not worrying about that external validation of other people and what they're going to think. And I had to start unfriending people. And that was a hard thing for me to do. Like, I didn't want to do that. I didn't want them to think anything. I mean, at first I muted people and all that stuff. And I knew they were muting me too, because people stopped commenting or liking things. And that just happens. And I'm like, I'm just going to let go of that energy. And if there's people that I know that oppose me and have maybe said comments or things like that, then I'm going to let go of that energy. I'm going to let it go. And if they want to come, reach out to me, and they still want to be involved in my life, great. I will open my arms, but it was more for my own empowerment, of like, what am I in charge of? What kind of energy am I allowing into my life? And you have to really look at that, because energy is a really big deal when you're healing, especially.
Yeah.
So
and just even being able to identify that is a big deal. Just say, this person, every time I'm with them, they bring me down. They make me feel unsure and unsafe about myself. And I know that they're my mom, or not my mom, but I mean, if it's somebody, it's a relationship that's close to you, whether it's a daughter or a son, or, a grandmother, or somebody that's really close for you. In your mind, you're taught that we should never sever those relationships, that we maintain them at all costs. But I think, like what you're saying, we have to distance ourselves and say, no, for my own benefit, my own healing, my own opportunity to move forward, I have to leave this relationship behind.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think knowing a healthy relationship is when you can also say the things that you feel are important to you, and they allow it. And we're taught, especially as women in the church, to be pretty submissive, right? And to kind of stay quiet, don't make waves, just kind of, and so I went probably to the extreme of like using my voice after I left because I needed it. It was part of my journey. It was part of what I needed. And now the pendulum is kind of, swung a little bit more to the middle.
Stabilized, yeah.
Yeah, but I think it's important, it is important to use our voice and to say how we feel or ask questions. And, we just tend to kind of get deer in the headlights a little bit, after we've left, because we're like, I don't know what to say. I don't know if I'm going to offend somebody. I don't want to fight with anybody. And you just do the same pattern, even though you're like, you have a lot of feelings and thoughts about what's going on.
And I know for members, they feel free to keep testifying to you, to keep it, sharing their testimony. And I'm praying and fasting for you. I'm putting your name in the temple. I'm doing all of these things for you. But what they don't ask is, what do you need from me? How can I help you?
Yeah.
And there's a little bit of training that goes on, but we can't help train them how to be in a relationship with us until we know how to be in a relationship with ourselves.
True. It is such a process. And that's so interesting because you brought that up actually in a post the other day about the I'm going to pray and fast for you. And I actually literally the day before I had somebody say that to me, on a friend that I'm still, friends with, and she's amazing. I adore her. And she said, you're going through a tough time. I'm going to fast and pray for you. And before I saw your response and what you kind of do, I was really proud of myself because I had said to her, I said, I know your intention with that. I really do. And I know that you really just want to send me good vibes but I don't really subscribe to the Mormon traditions anymore. And that's totally cool that you do. But for me, I just wanted to let you know that. But I wanted you to know that I completely know your intention in your heart. Yeah. And she took it. She was like, oh, and because they don't. That's the script.
Yeah.
They don't have any. They're not doing the critical thinking.
Well, if I don't know what to do and I don't know how to manage or cope, it's just a blanket. I'll fast and pray.
Yeah.
And literally, there might be a few times when I said I'll fast and pray for you where I actually fasted. It's more like one time I snuck you in a prayer, and really, I don't even do the fasting and praying for you, but I'm going to say I'll fast and pray for you.
Absolutely.
I don't know how to handle it.
Yeah, that is so true. And kind of leading into the next kind of thing that helps. And for me, this helped, but not everybody has the luxury to move out of state. But for me, starting fresh, that was a big deal for me. And it took me 4 years after I had left to finally be able to, where the time was right for my husband and my family to leave. And it has done even more healing for us and more awareness on our patterns but like I'm telling you, it was the first time in so many years that we didn't even know conference was going on because we didn't have all the channels saying it was the LDS conference. And so that's healing, I think, it's nice to be able to get out of the environment if you can. Now, I do know a lot of people that aren't able to get out of the environment. And I know a lot of people have been able to figure out how to heal, staying in the environment and love their environment, and because all their family is great. Most of my family wasn't really supportive, and so I didn't really have those roots there like that. And if it was different, then maybe I would have had a different frame of mind about leaving. But starting fresh, sometimes even a new neighborhood, go move. It's important, I think, for you to have your autonomy, especially as you're healing. And I had to, we actually moved out of a neighborhood, and when we were in Saratoga Springs and moved to Lehigh, and we started having the neighbors and Bishop come, and I had to set some pretty clear boundaries and say, no, this is not okay, and we don't want this, like, we wish you well, but they kept sending over the 12-year-old boys, the deacons, to collect fast offerings every time. And I finally had to put up a sign, and because legally that you're not supposed to, if you have a sign up. And so I had to tell the bishop, like, hey, there's a fine, here. And because they would not stop. And so you have to sometimes really set some boundaries and create that safe environment for yourself.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, again, living in Utah it's it's difficult. And this is something I tell my clients. I hope I'm not too dismissive about it, but when they live in Utah, I'm like, Utah is so densely LDS, but it's also densely ex-LDS.
It is becoming more so. Absolutely. It's finding those
So
people.
yeah, they're
And
there. They're around. Every ward has a whole slew of inactives and ex-LDS. And so it's almost like you have to do the reverse discovery and see who's not in the church so that you can establish
think about it,
relationships.
like, you're not going to a building to meet
Right.
up with each other every week to find each other. So that's why kind of your online support groups are, I think, important, because there's a lot of people that you can. I've learned a lot of people in Lehigh that I'm like, oh, you're right down the road
There's
from
a
me.
whole group of them, at least a ward and maybe a steak.
Absolutely. So you can find that support. It's there, but it's really important to start fresh sometimes, you know?
Yeah. Oh, I
That would,
would
I
agree.
feel like that's an important strategy for yourself to really look at. Um, I would say the last thing for me, and just, I mean, there's obviously so many things, so many topics, right,
No,
Wendi?
we could talk about it forever, right?
You know, is this, I think this is probably the most healing for me, is really finding the understanding and growth in the situation. What has this done for me to evolve? And when you can do that, I think that's when you can really let go. Or, as you know, many LDS and Christians use the word forgiveness, almost overly used sometimes, and used as a weapon sometimes. The word forgiveness. For a long time, I was like, I don't like that word. I'm going to use let go, you know.
Yeah.
But with my father, I came full circle, and I realized, you know, he was the best father that I could have ever had in this life, because he gave me the best gift of being able to not have to have approval from other people and start that journey of really not, you know, giving up myself for somebody else's path or what they want or what they believe, but for my own.
Yeah.
And that is such a beautiful gift. So if we never ever have any, you know, talk again, that to me, I can hold on and just say, you know what, I'm grateful for that. That is one of
And
the best things.
it's like twisted in a way in that
So
he never intended to give you this awesome gift. And if you told him that was the gift, he'd probably be like, I don't want to be the giver
yeah,
of
no,
that gift.
totally.
But in the grand spectrum of things, it really is when you can transform the trauma into resilience. Your faith
Yeah,
crisis and your faith transition is the most epic, amazing, transformational experience. But until you become aware and you start doing the inner work and you start following the patterns and you break away from the dysfunctional coping strategies that we used to use before, we can't see it as our greatest gift. It's still, we're just wounded over and over
mm-hmm.
again. So I love that you said that about your dad understanding that he just loves you so much. It probably would have hurt even more if he would have said, okay, I don't care, Ashley, go do what you're going to do. But the
Yeah,
fact that he
it
was
wouldn't
hurt.
propelled me into the introspection that I had to do, and what was going on. And, you know, people ask me all the time, well, do you miss him? And, well, yeah, I do. Of course I miss him. There's a loss. Like, even though it's like he's died, like, you know, but he's still alive. And so it's that is a feeling that it happens, is that it's a little even worse, I think, after, if, you know, than when somebody dies. But then,
Yeah.
but no, I'm not discounting when somebody dies at all, because it's just, there's pain there that, you know, and love there, you know, that you want to give to them, but you can't give to them,
Not
you
being
know,
reciprocated.
it's not being reciprocated. Yeah. And you've got to have healthy boundaries for yourself. But the other thing that I realized, Wendi, and this is the last thing, is what I miss is that the relationship of what it could have been.
Yeah.
And that's a really important distinction, I think, for us to figure out is that something was that relationship ever really what we wanted? Like, in this dream world that we, have of, father-daughter relationships or whatever, was it really ever that way? Could it ever really be that way? I don't know. So, but I mourn the loss of that. Of what could be, and so that's, I think, important to understand, because, what the relationship was or what it became, I don't miss that. I don't miss that part,
Well,
really angry
a lot of
part.
times when we leave, we don't recognize how toxic and dysfunctional our family dynamics were. We don't know that because we're living in it, we're swimming in it 24/7. And then when you step back and you realize there's no boundaries, he was authoritarian, he had no intentions of me growing beyond his current constructs. And so, but was it even really that healthy? And so,
it wasn't, it was all of those things, but I think, you can stay in that spot too and keep focusing on all of those things, but then it's really, I choose now to try to focus on what he did give me. What were the things that I took from, and what he taught me. And there was a lot of good. There was not just all bad, like at the end. But that, I think if we can continue to do that and look at that, and still I can say I'm sending love, then I think that's where you can find a little bit of that peace that we all search for.
Yeah, I agree. Great tips. I love it. Well, thank you so much for visiting with me and sharing what you have learned. And I wish you the best of luck on
Thank you.
Continue on in your journey. And
thank you so much.
Stay connected.
Somebody, and we can, absolutely, anytime. I'd love to help in any way.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you, Ashley.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye-bye. You too.